Today, we are going to take a look at James chapter 1, verse 2 and 3. Let me read this verse to you. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. First, this epistle was written primarily to suffering Christians scattered after the death of Stephen as far as Cyprus and Syrian Antioch. The readers may suffer various kinds of suffering. Some may suffer their own physical suffering, or some may lose their close friends, even their jobs, or suffer any kind of illness. In verse 2, the writer says trials of various kinds. It may include all kinds that we can think of. James also encourages us to count those suffering, discounting it as all joy. Not because suffering itself is good, but because what it can produce is good. Also, that the testing of our faith, here, our faith produces steadfastness. What is it? Basically, steadfastness is steadfastness means steadfastness means a heart that persistently follows God. So there are so many examples in the Bible of the people who endured various kind of suffering and had a great faith. Okay, let's first think about Abraham. Abraham's suffering was childlessness until he became 100 years old. His childlessness produced great suffering because he tried to accomplish God's promise on his own strength, but he couldn't. So, he and his wife were never happy about their childlessness. But when he became 100 years old, he and his wife had no natural ability to produce any kind of offspring. But when he had Isaac, he knew that it was not his power, but God's power to give him his son. So his childlessness has never been happy to him. It has never brought any kind of joy to him. But when God's promise was accomplished, his suffering produced the great faith, even to offer his child with the belief that God can raise his son. He has so much faith in God that even if he killed his child, he believed that God can raise his son, just as his dead body could produce his child. He was able to believe that God can raise his son even though he killed him. Okay, the second example is David. David's suffering was that the king Saul had pursued David for years. The pursuit of Saul has never been happy to David. But when David became the king of Judah, he learned that it was not his power to make him the king. It was God's power. It was not because David was good, nor because Saul was powerless. It was by God's appointment. David knew it. So David's suffering produced his faith to praise God in most unlikely circumstances, which means David had the power to praise God when he was not happy. We don't have that. Not many of us have that ability because we praise God only when we are happy. But was David was able to praise God in whatever circumstance. Okay, let's see the other example. Paul's suffering. What did it produce? The thorn in Paul's flesh produced his humility in his ministry. We instinctively think that the more we know about the Bible or the more we know about God, we can be humble. But it was not. It was not. In Paul's case, so God put the thorn in Paul's flesh to make him humble, so that when he did great things, it became evident to everyone that it was God's power, not the power of Paul. So let's see other thing in next time.